the Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
I've been very lucky to speak to some of the greatest sports stars on the planet on the Best in the World with Richard Parr. Olympic champions, world number ones, world record holders. And from the 40 previous episodes, everyone has been really friendly, really helpful. Everyone really wants to give their knowledge to the rest of the world so that we all can improve our sporting careers or just our everyday lives. And that's what we try to do every week on this podcast. And I've met some really friendly people on the way. But I've got to say, KK Clark today is my guest, the Olympic water polo champion, and she's got to be up there with one of the friendliest we've had on the show. Really fun, positive girl from California. I think it might be the sun out there. That certainly helps, doesn't it? You know, when you're like me and you live in dreary England, we become a little bit negative at times, even though I try to be around positive people most of the time. But KK is a really interesting and fun person that we've had on this week's show, and it's not been easy on her way to becoming an Olympic champion. She tells her story about how they suffered tragedy and adversity on their way to becoming Olympic champions during their build up to the 2016 Rio Olympics. KK also talks about how she didn't get her place at the 2015 World Championships, missed out on a gold medal there, but fought back to become part of the winning team at the Olympic Games. We talk about a lot of things related to that journey and how she's become a champion. We also have a bit of fun. We talk about Flop Friday. We talk about the book she reads. We talk about how she likes to journal. We talk about meditation. And we also look ahead to what her next challenge might be. It's a really fun chat with KK, and we start off by talking about the fun things that she's been up to since winning gold, of going to see lots of different sports teams. So this is a really positive episode with KK Clark, the Olympic water polo champion. I can't wait for you to hear it, and it will be with you in just a few moments. I just would like to do a little bit of housekeeping on the show. First of all, you may know I'm doing a brand new sports breakfast show. It's live on Facebook. It's live streamed on YouTube. I would love for you to check it out. It's called Sportacino. We digest sports at breakfast. We do product reviews. We do competitions. We do polls. We have guests. And it's lots of fun every single weekday morning at 8 GMT. If you're in a different part of the world and you can't see it live, don't worry. You can watch the show back on Facebook and on YouTube. And you can also listen back to it as an audio podcast on iTunes. Speaking about listening to things, you can listen to audiobooks with Audible. Audible is one of the leading suppliers of audiobooks in the world. They've got over 180,000 titles to choose from, and they are this week's sponsor. And by being this week's sponsor, they are giving you the chance to test out their service. All you've got to do is sign up at audibletrial.com/best. That's audibletrial.com/best, and you can get a free audiobook and a 30-day trial of their service. It's a product I personally use. I highly recommend it. You can listen to audiobooks on your MP3, on your iPhone, on your Android, on your Kindle. Lots of different ways that you can learn from the very best and listen to some of the greatest books on the planet. Please go and do that. Now, talking about the greatest things on the planet, we've got one of the greatest water polo players in the world, on the planet. The Olympic champion KK Clark is next on the Best in the World.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
KK Clark, Olympic water polo champion, welcome to the Best in the World with Richard Parr. You won that gold medal back in August, and I see you've been having lots of fun on your Instagram page. You've been to baseball, you've been to see Golden State, you've been to see hockey. How much have you been enjoying all of that?
Oh my gosh. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to be on. And then, yes, you know, I've been a sports fan my whole life. So being able to do these honorary events and sort of award sort of tour has been just so fun. And while it's been a little awkward because I live in LA, but I'm from Northern California, and a lot of the professional sports teams are big rivals. So I've been doing the Dodgers game and the Giants game, and my Giants fan in me totally cringes at that. It's been super, super fun. And again, I'm just a big sports fan. Being able to kind of see those sports organizations up close has been just a joy. So.
And I guess when you're representing America, everyone's just supporting you anyway. So for those of the fans who might know that you're a Giants fan when you're at the Dodgers, for example, they're all just happy to see you and happy to share in your success, I guess.
Oh, totally. Everyone's Team USA, so that's kind of how I've been justifying it in my head. But I've, I try to say yes to everything because I don't know when an opportunity like this will ever kind of come back around, and just really just trying to enjoy, let everything sink in. Even though, all of this stuff is just a cherry on top. You don't go into an Olympic Games expecting to win first off, and then expecting to kind of have this like grand little victory tour when you get home. So just kind of trying to take it one day at a time and enjoy it all.
What's been the best moment since winning gold?
Oh, man.
Apart from being on the Best in the World with Richard Parr, the second best moment.
Apart from this moment right now, I actually have a pretty funny moment. And it was actually directly right after the gold medal game. So it's a bit of a story, so bear with me. But one of our goalies made a tradition during the season that on every Friday we would all belly flop into the water, and we called it Flop Friday. And it was so fun for me because by the time we got to a Friday when we were training, we were barely moving. We were all just zombies, and we were just so tired. And so it was just a great pick-me-up at the end of the week. We would all belly flop, and we're all really competitive girls, so we would all try to outdo one another. And it ended up just being such a funny laugh. Gag. I'm so happy our coaches let us do it. So the day that the gold medal game was on was a Friday, and we were all kind of joking in the morning, like, "Ooh, flop Friday," but nobody would dare flop in the morning, swim before the game, because if you really go for it, you can definitely injure yourself. So nobody was doing that. And then after we won the gold, we all were running into the warm down arena. There's nobody in the warm down pool because it's the gold medal game, and we all line up on the side and we do a flop all together. And it was no cameras, no nothing. Nobody could have seen it, but it was just kind of a moment for me that sort of exemplified our team, is that we work really hard, but we also have fun and we do everything together. And that was maybe not the answer you were looking for, but for me, just the quintessential moment, like for the team. It was one of the last times we're together, because once the games are over, everyone kind of goes their separate ways, and it's really a different change because you see everyone day in, day out. They're all your best friends. You're grinding together, and then everyone kind of goes off, and it's definitely a bittersweet thing. So that's just kind of my memory that I love to hold on to.
By not doing it before that final, was there any members of the team who were a bit superstitious, who were almost like, "Oh, we should do it because we've done it all the way in this journey"? Was there anyone like that, or was everyone like, "I just don't want to be injured"?
No. I think we all kind of knew we wanted to, but nobody, I think it was, if we do it before the game, we might even jinx ourselves. So I think everyone was kind of on the same page. And we weren't too superstitious because we if you get too superstitious, you get hard in that you need something to happen in order. I don't know, it's kind of the whole thing with luck. And we kind of all thought you kind of make your own luck and your preparation. And so, no, I think we were all kind of on the same page that we wanted to do it together later. Maybe it was we didn't want to jinx ourselves either.
You mentioned that this period now is all a little bit of a blur because you're having so much fun. And you say that you've moved away from being with all of your teammates and almost like a family for that whole period. What else do you miss about that kind of pre-Olympics routine? Do you miss that kind of daily kind of workout, that daily schedule, or is it quite refreshing just to have some free time?
Oh, no. I mean, I laugh about it because when we were in it and we were training so many hours, I would just say to myself every day, I can't wait until this is over and I have so much free time. I'll do all these things with all my free time. And here I am being like, I really miss the routine. I really wish I could be getting up so much earlier and going to see my girlfriends and working out together. You kind of black out the really hard moments of just the not pain, but just the workouts and the things that were really excruciating. And because you really just look back and think of the memories. I miss being on the bus with the girls making jokes, and we could be wildly inappropriate at times and just laugh together. And that's definitely the things that I miss the most. And I definitely miss a bit of structure. I think I have a little bit of anxiety with all the free time I have. And so it's definitely moving forward going to be kind of that balancing act, going to, try to continue working out. But the way that the quad is structured for us is, this time of year is really slow anyway. And a lot of our girls who were so young are back in college, and we had a girl go back to high school. So when we do see everyone, I'm like, hey, Aria, how's high school? Like, that's just wild to me to, here I am, I'm 26, definitely evaluating things, could totally move on with the next chapter of my life. And I shared something with this girl who's just beginning. And that was kind of the interesting thing about our team is just our age range and how our coach was able to make us feel like a family despite how many of us are on different places in our lives, I think.
Let's talk about that. One of your coaches also had a tragedy just before the start of the games.
Yeah.
How much did that affect you all?
Our head coach, Adam, lost his brother, who we knew really well. He was a big supporter of the team, and just an overall amazing guy. And we had been in Rio, I think, for a few days, maybe 1 or 2 days. And in the morning, we were all meeting to go to our practice that morning. And we walk up and we see him, and, you can tell immediately that something's off. His body language, everything. Everyone was standing. He was sitting. He had his sunglasses on. Just, you knew something was wrong. And he opened up to us and told us what had happened. Blake had been surfing, doing what he loved. Adam really focused on the good things, but in his message, obviously, he was in so much pain, and it was really, really, really difficult to see someone that you care about in that much pain. And his big message to us, I don't know how he had, the presence of mind to think about us in this moment, but he was like, you guys just need to do exactly what you have been doing. Don't change because of me. I need you guys to be the exact same. Because that's what we had been doing up until this point. He just didn't want anything to change on the team. He told us, he said, I'm going to have some moments. I'm going to have, I'm going to be fine, but I will have moments, and you need to just bear with me. And I don't know if I'm going to go home yet, but you guys go to practice. I'll see you when you get back. And while we were at practice, he made the decision to fly home to Northern California to be with his family, and then made plans to come back to Rio before our first game against Spain. So, and we were just there for him. We all did our best to honor that request of his. And our assistant coaches really stepped up, and we only had, a handful of practices before the first game, but it was really hard. It kind of changed the mood in a way. And in the beginning of our process, our coach, he's such a great coach. We do all these exercises, and we honestly map out things that could go wrong. And we write them all down, and we try to come up with plans to work around them, just to create an awareness about those things. And ultimately, we were ready for adversity, and we were ready for adversity that we couldn't maybe expect or put our finger on. But you can't prepare for, a death of a loved one. And one of our girls, her mom, had a heart attack the day before we left. There was a lot of health-related issues that we faced, which we didn't prepare for, which you can't prepare for. But that was kind of the adversity that our team faced. And we were able to kind of navigate it together because we were such a close team. By the time, we were there at the Olympic Games, we really stayed close together, stayed in our bubble, stayed focused, and just leaned on each other. But it was tough. You prepare for adversity in the water, referees, other teams, all that stuff. And it was just so out of left field. But, he was one of the strongest people that I know. And again, it was so hard to witness it, but obviously we were able to kind of walk away from the games with a overall positive experience.
It's amazing how your team were able to focus when all of that was happening around you. this was your first Olympics, is that right? Apart from these adversities and these tragedies, how was it? How was the rest of it for you? How did it feel? Was it everything you expected?
Yes and no. So I grew up watching the Olympics. I think my first memory of being totally inspired with every piece of my body was watching the 1996 Olympics when Carrie Strug, the American gymnast, did a vault on a broken ankle and landed it, and the crowd went wild and they won gold, and it was just like witnessing superhero, and I was just, and I wanted to be a gymnast after that. And I'm 6'2", so I knew pretty quickly, or at least the instructors and the gymnastics instructors knew pretty quickly that that wasn't in my future. And then in the Winter Games, I was always in awe of the ice skaters. So I've always had an itch to be at that level, to compete at that level. It took me a while to really commit to fulfilling the process, because I grew up and I had a fear of failure ultimately. It was something I had to kind of figure out and confront on my own, because I was never fully committed, because I was always like, well, if it doesn't work out, I want it to know that maybe it was some other reason, but I had to really fully commit. I would say kind of late, maybe like 2014, 15, where I was like, I'm going to do this no matter what, whether I make the final roster or not. I have to commit. And so, I mean, having been there, it was incredible. It was surreal, definitely, not as over the top as maybe I expected, because we had been to a lot of tournaments. The Pan American Games is set up really similarly with a village. I've been to a World University Games, which has also a very similar feel with a village and an opening and closing ceremony. So that was helpful, because I wasn't a deer in the headlights. But knowing that someone said of this thing when we were out there, that they're like, isn't it crazy to think that where we are right now is just the fittest place in the world, like the most fit place in the world? And you kind of sit on that and think about it, and you're like, wow, all the best athletes in the world are here in this moment. And that was pretty kind of crazy to think about.
Were there any athletes or stars that you saw who you were excited to see at all?
Yeah. My grandfather was a really big tennis fan, so we sat behind Serena Williams on the bus to the opening ceremony, and you're in that moment, and you're kind of had that internal battle, like, am I a fan or am I a peer? Am I a fan or am I a peer? Like, I don't, I'm not sure, like, do I talk to her? Do I ask for autographs? Like, I don't know. And ultimately I decided, I was like, no, I'm a peer. So I wasn't going to kind of fangirl out. I was just like, hey, yeah, we're both here. We're both athletes, like Olympic athletes. This is cool. And then, because all of the U.S. team is in one building and there's only 2 or 3 elevators, so you end up seeing a lot of the athletes in the elevators, and you see Michael Phelps going to his race or coming home from a race, and it's kind of, you're in an elevator, you're like, hey, good swim tonight, It was like obviously the most decorated Olympian. But again, it's really cool, because you walk around and everyone's there for the same reason, and seeing. And there were some athletes who chose not to come for, whatever reason, whether it was the headlines or, their own schedules or whatever. And so to see athletes of that caliber, people who don't necessarily, maybe the Olympics is not the pinnacle of their sport, come and represent their country, I really had a lot of respect for those athletes. So.
Yeah, it's funny, coming from the side as a sports journalist, I always had that kind of distance whenever I interviewed someone I really admired or something like that. It's that fine line of, I'm a professional, I shouldn't get a photo with them, but I really want a photo with them. And as totally. I've got older and interviewed more people, I look back and think, I wish I'd got a photo with this person. I wish I'd kind of remembered this moment. And I think now I try to do it, but I make sure it's in the right situation. When, where and when's not. And I'm sure after all of your success and everything like that, Serena Williams now wishes she had a photo with you. So,
well,
next time.
You. Yeah, I know. We've been trying to get more people. We've been trying to grow the sport of water polo. It's not necessarily the biggest sport. A lot of people honestly don't know about it. And we did have, I think, Cam Newton, the quarterback for the North Carolina Panthers, I think it is. He was doing a Nickelodeon show, and this young girl wanted to be a water polo player for a day. So he came by practice with her, And that was kind of a cool thing for us to have, someone from such a mainstream sport here in America come and try water polo. And there was this viral photo that came out of him coming out of the water and like shooting a water polo ball. And, I think Sports Center got on it. All these people were tweeting it. And the funny thing is they're like, oh, he can't, he's good at everything, water polo too. But the joke on our team was that when our captain was underwater, like totally lifting him up because it's so difficult to get up and do the egg beater if you don't know how. And she was just like in cahoots about it afterward because she was like, if only they knew, But that was great for us, just overall having someone like that come to a practice and see what it's about, see what water polo is about, because it's a tough sport. And I don't think a lot of people understand exactly, what's going on. So yeah, I mean, obviously what we did at the Olympics put us a little bit on of a stage too, just being able to represent and execute our goals and dreams, and yeah, just getting the sport out there.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
More from KK Clark in just a moment. Just a quick reminder that today's show is brought to you by Audible. To download their service for free for a 30-day trial, just go to audibletrial.com/best. That's audibletrial.com/best to get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial. We all love the word free. And guess what? We all love to get smarter, and we can do that with Audible, with their 180,000 titles to choose from. Lots of sports books there. I listen to all different types of audiobooks in the gym, on the bus, on the train, in the car, going for a walk. It's a great place to get smarter every single day. Check it out, audibletrial.com/best for best in the world, because that's what this show is. We speak to Olympic champions, world record holders, and world number ones. And let's return to my conversation with the Olympic water polo champion, KK Clark.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Of course, there's some kids who don't know about water polo unless they watch it at the Olympics. But unlike you have a whole family background with former Olympians in water polo. What was that like growing up with all of that around? And did it add any pressure?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it did not add pressure. If anything, it was the kind of the spark plug, the initial thing that was, oh, like I have this in my blood, like I'm kind of meant to do this. And it was kind of the first maybe confidence builder, first spark, like I said, because I would go to my cousin's house and, they have, the medals hung along the wall, and, we saw those and we were like, you're like Olympians. At first, I don't think I put two and two together. But then, once I got old enough to be such a fan of the Olympics and realized that my uncle had been there and my aunt and him had qualified in 1980, was a really exciting thing. And, I wasn't always a water polo tracked mind. I was a big equestrian when I was younger. I had that horse phase that I never actually grew out of until maybe high school. And, it took me a while to come around to the sport because it can be so challenging. But my uncle Chris was one of my first coaches, and my cousins and my sisters all played it. And if you look at our team, the Olympic team, a lot of us have siblings that also play or played. And I think it is one of those sports that you get into it because you know someone who's in it. But being able to kind of come full circle with my immediate family and having to go to the Olympics again, got to go home, bring the medal back, show it to my aunt and uncle, was a really, really cool thing for me to do because, I consider my Aunt Mary Beth an Olympian. She was just a total cool swimmer. Whenever we go to world championships, I always find the swimming coaches and I'm like, oh, do you know Mary Beth Linsmeyer? That's my aunt. And they say they're like, she was such a stud, And unfortunately, she made that 80 team, but we didn't go. We boycotted that year. And then 84, she just missed it barely. And it was really kind of a a bittersweet thing for me, because I know she doesn't always consider herself an Olympian because she didn't go to the games, but to me, she's one of my ultimate heroes, because I mean, I can't imagine training your whole life for something and then ultimately, a month out of the Olympics being it, kind of taken away is a really hard thing for me to think about. And, she's definitely one of my heroes in that regard.
And you had a similar situation yourself, didn't you, about a year ago when you missed out on being in part of the World Championships with the US team. How did that feel when all of that happened?
Yeah, that was a bit different because I think hers was a little more out of her control, what she went through. But for me, yes, it's out of my control in that the coach is choosing the roster, but I hadn't been playing at a level that I needed to play in order to make this roster. And looking back, our coach, he really tests a lot of people in different ways. He would test us in practice, challenge us these ways, and then challenge us, by doing, and he had to see what the chemistry of the team would be like with different people on it. You're kind of constantly playing around with that. But it was really, really tough for me at that point. I'd always been a bubble player. I was always a role player on this team and overjoyed to do the job, right? I mean, any way on this team I was willing to do. But up until last summer, 2015, I had been on the rosters. So I had kind of barely made the roster. And then the biggest fear kind of being not being on the roster. And then we had a long summer. I was in Canada for Pan American Games where I didn't really play very well. And then we had 14 girls with us. We always had 14 girls at a big tournament training up until the games started, because our coach was always inviting us to be really competitive. And, nobody felt like their spots were safe. We had Olympic gold medalists from 2012, not knowing they were on the team until he named the team in late June. So it was always a really intense environment. And we go to Spain for a few days for a training thing. And, I played okay, not great. And then we get to Russia and we're having breakfast and he puts his hand on my shoulder. He's like, "Hey, can you come to my room after breakfast?" And I knew immediately what it was about. And I was just like trying not to start crying. Like I was just like, my biggest fear had ultimately happened. And it was just an awful feeling. Knowing, half of it was knowing as an athlete that I couldn't get out of the slump, that I wasn't helping myself. And then just knowing that I wasn't going to be able to compete with the team at World Champs. And I went up to his room and we talked, and he kind of explains himself a little bit, and he said, "You have the choice. You can go home or you can stay in Russia. It's totally up to you." And I definitely had a pity party for a good 24 hours. Like I was just so sorry for myself, and it was, so hard. Woe is me. And then ultimately kind of asked myself the question, how do you want to remember this process at the end of the day? And two, how do you want your teammates to remember you? And I kind of just had to make that choice there, and I ultimately decided to stay. I was going to stay in Russia. There was no way I was leaving. And I was going to try to just blow people out of the water with my, with how I respond, like just enthusiastic and cheering on everyone. I was going to try to be the best teammate I could be. And I ended up going on these runs with the coaching staff, because they do, obviously the girls who are competing, you're resting and getting bussed between practices in the hotel and everything. And obviously I wasn't competing, so I was like, well, I guess I should work out. And I ended up going on this 5-mile run, a daily 5-mile run with the coaching staff in these shoes that we got in Canada that were paper thin Nikes, like not meant to be running shoes. And I am not a runner either. It was kind of like a self-punishment thing, I think. And I get back to the hotel after the first day, and I was limping on both legs. I had an ice pack on both calves. It was so mortifying, and my teammates are just laughing at me. I ended up, it ended up being a really funny memory that we all kind of look back on. And ultimately, I totally changed my mindset. I had so much fun being in the stands cheering everyone on. While it was really painful that I couldn't be, in the team meetings, I realized I just wanted to be a part of it. So I made that decision that it's not about making the final roster. I'm just going to, obviously there's nowhere worse than here. So there's only I have nothing to lose at this point. I'm going to change these things about me, and I'm going to work every single day to get myself back in the mix. Change a few things outside of the pool. And
what were these things, KK? What were these things that you changed?
So they were really small things, to be honest. I talked to my sports psychologist because I'm really open to that stuff. And his big thing was, what is your plan and how are you going to follow through with that plan? And I thought about, I thought about in high school how I had a syllabus and how I would just follow that syllabus, and it was just a helpful guide. So I made a syllabus for myself, and I had 4 categories. And the first one was watching, and I was going to watch a sports-related, inspiring movie once a week. It was all kind of like cultural stuff for my brain, like something that inspires me. So I did that. I would watch a 30 for 30 1 week, those ESPN documentaries. And then I watched Rudy for the first time. I had never seen Rudy. Like, what a great movie. I watched the Rocky movies. I'd never seen those. Things that right? Things that I had never watched growing up. It was really fun for me. I kind of felt like a kid too. It was really liberating in a way. So that was one of the first categories. And that was always fun to get home from practice, so tired, put on a movie, eat dinner. It was just so fun for me. One of the other things I did was journal. So I got a journal and I wrote an intention every single morning. When I got to practice, I wrote down my intention for practice that day, whether it was just a skill-based thing or just noticing where my mind was. I was just paying a lot more attention to where my mind was, kind of got into the meditation thing, which is just helpful. You can catch yourself if you're going in a negative direction and try to kind of reroute yourself. What else? So it was reading. Oh, and reading. It was watching, reading, writing, and meditating. Those were the 4 categories. So reading, I started reading before bed. I'm always on my phone. So I was really trying to get off my phone before bed so I could sleep well. So I started reading sports books. I read the Andre Agassi autobiography. I read a book about golf and somehow, drew things from each of these stories and people's lives that I could somehow tap into or relate to or just distract myself even because, we had so much of water polo day in and day out that it was just a really refreshing thing. And like I said, I'm a huge sports fan. So it was honestly just kind of good brain food for me to watch these movies, read these books, and then reflect in the journal daily. I wrote down positives and negatives from practice every day, and then meditated. And that was a little bit less consistent than the others because it's hard for me to just lay out a mat and do it with everything going on. But I think just trying to build those habits and follow through with them just gave me the peace of mind that I was doing something extra, that I was doing something for me and putting myself in a little bit better of a situation mentally to kind of attack the challenge that faced me, being the best teammate, getting back in this sort of mix and ultimately realizing what I could control and what I couldn't. It's kind of like if I did all of this stuff and still didn't make the team, at least I was doing something about it and I wasn't just kind of crossing my fingers and really hoping and wishing that something would change his mind, So yeah, it was a stressful time, but those sorts of things kind of made it fun for me and made the process a little bit more refreshing week to week.
That's really interesting. There's a lot of things I'm interested in there, especially the movies. You can't beat a Rocky movie. In fact, there was a really...
I know.
They're so good. There was a really cheesy movie series we did in England called Goal, which is kind of the soccer equivalent of, say, a Rocky movie. And I remember watching it about 5 years ago, and I thought... if I was a teenager, I'd absolutely love this movie because it's so inspiring. You should check that one out. I wanted to talk a bit more about the journal. Oh, I've got a book recommendation for you as well, if you're into all of those books. The Art of Learning by Josh Whiteskin. He was a chess champion and then used the skills of chess to become, I think he was like a competitive Tai Chi world champion. There's like a a more than an artistic version, and it's all about the skills he was able to transfer from one to the other. So that's a really good book. I'd really recommend that. But
I'm definitely checking that out.
Yeah, what I'd wanted to know is when it came to the journaling, and you were writing every day, would you go back and reread what you'd written, or was it just the process of writing it made you think about that day and you were just able to focus more on what you needed to achieve?
So for me, I think just the process of writing was really helpful. I usually didn't go back. However, there were moments. I think just having it written down to go back and look at was really helpful, because if we were at a really big tournament, or if maybe 1 week was really not going so well, I would look back and see if I was I making the same mistakes? Did I not really process something that he was saying to me? Was I taking the writing seriously? Is what I was writing down actual legitimate specific things, or was I just kind of venting or spewing? I don't know. And then we journaled. I think the big thing also was journaling at the Olympics. It was a little bit different. I kind of just wrote down what I did that day. It wasn't kind of an evaluation thing. So I haven't looked back at that yet. I have the journal in front of me. It's a big giant book. And then after we won, I haven't touched my journal. So I'm kind of probably going to regret, not writing down the after effects and everything that happened. But the last thing I wrote, I think, was, let me see, I'm opening it right now. I think, what was it? It was the day of the gold medal game, and I wrote, "Get it done, freaking get it done." That's all I wrote. It was just in big capital letters, just kind of, what you know. It's not like anything's going to change it now. Just do whatever it takes, and I think it's going to be cool in, months or years to come to be able to look back on those. But it's so fresh right now that I haven't quite opened the book up yet.
Yeah. Something to cherish, I'm sure. And the meditation. Now, did you teach that yourself? Was it something that the team were all taught? And how much time would you spend when you'd actually do it?
Yeah. Okay. So when I was in high school, one of the classes that I took was a prayer and meditation class. And it was, one of those classes that maybe some kids signed up for because, it looked fun or just different. But I remember just it making such an imprint on me. And the crazy thing I just thought of the other day was that we did a meditation that was, where are you going to be in 10 years? And in high school, I was 16, and I meditated that I would be living alone next to the beach and all this stuff. And I'm 26 now, 10 years later, and I'm in a studio in Hermosa Beach next to the beach. And I just kind of laughed at that because I was like, is that, is it something in my brain, totally just a subconscious thing that I got here, or, I don't know. So it makes you think about it a little bit. But so I was introduced to meditation and mindfulness in high school, and then our sports psychologist, we did a lot of different things with him, but one of the things we did do was meditating, but mindfulness. And what we would do was just for 5, 10, 20 minutes, you sit with your thoughts and you just kind of try to catch your thoughts and bring it back to the present moment. It's just kind of all about being aware with the present moment, because in a game, and it was all kind of related to sports, and in a game, in big moments, where's your mind? Are you thinking about the mistake you just made, or are you in the present moment? Because when athletes talk about being in the zone, a lot of that is kind of you're just in the present moment and you're lost in it. So it wasn't trying to make it the present moment all the time, because you can't do that, but it was just trying to catch yourself if, you were being distracted, or if your mind was in a different place. So one of my friends sent me a book just called Mindfulness, an 8-week plan for finding peace in a frantic world. And I just started reading that, and it had its own little meditations in it. Some audio stuff that I would put my yoga mat out in my apartment, put on one of the tracks, and do the meditation. So it just and they were all just kind of bringing you back to the present moment, focusing on a couple different things. And that's kind of just what I did. And I did it the book, you're supposed to do it twice a day, but with my schedule, that was pretty difficult. So I ended up just doing, once a day. And then trying, I never actually completed the book. But I think just, like I said, getting those habits and doing what I could when I could, was ultimately helpful for me. But mindfulness is a practice. It's something that you have to continue doing. And that's kind of the next challenge for me, I think, and whatever I do next, continuing to incorporate all these things, that really helped me with this process, with this journey into whatever's next, because I think it's all translatable. But again, it's a practice and it's tough to do, the discipline that it takes to do twice a day. It's funny, probably coming from me discipline. I was getting up at 5:30 every morning, getting home at 6 and, doing all these things. But I think it's kind of my next challenge, to being able to spend so much time, with my mind and trying to continue to improve it as I move on, with whatever the next journey is for me.
I want to talk about what's next in just a moment, and I've already written down the name of that book, Mindfulness, and I'll be checking out myself, because if you can become an Olympic champion with the help of that, I can certainly improve as a person. So I'll take a look at that. So you said you had that moment when you knew that they were going to cut you from the team for the World Championships. Now, when it came to the moment where they were selecting the final team for those Olympic Games, how confident were you at that moment that you had made the right changes, that your place was going to be there, or were you uncertain at the time?
Yeah, so obviously there was, a whole year almost in between those two moments. And I came back from the August of 2015. We had kind of a few weeks off, and I came back, on fire. We had this camp in Colorado Springs that was honestly a really kind of relaxed, wasn't laid back. We were still, training really hard, but kind of easing into things again, because we knew the year prior to the Olympics was going to be intense. And for me, I think all my teammates were kind of, with the mindset, like, we're easing into it. This is fun. And for me, I was like so zoned in, like, I'm going to beat this person at this skill, like just a little bit too much, I think. And so I just came back in the fall and I was on fire, and it was just so intense, so focused. And maybe in a way it was really, maybe I stood out to the coaches, I don't know. But when we started making, having trips and teams, we went to Rio in November for a test tournament, and I was on that trip. So I made that team in November, and then I think we had a tournament at home that, again, there's kind of big numbers, he's feeling people out. And then we had a couple more trips, and then we went to the Olympic qualifier in Gouda, the Netherlands, in March. And, making that team was going to be a big step in making the final roster. But again, I was, at this point, I learned my lesson. By making one team, it doesn't mean anything about the next team. And ultimately, I was on the roster that went to the qualifier, and we were able to qualify for the Olympics in March. And then we had kind of that 2 or 3 month period where we were training again, and we had a World League Super Final, kind of the last tournament before the Olympics, and he brings 14 girls, and me and one girl are taking turns playing in the games, and it's a total flashback. I'm like, oh, what are you, how are you going to respond? What are you going to do? What if he doesn't pick you? Just there were definitely moments where there's a little bit of a freak out, and then I was able, with the skills I think I developed, I was able to kind of catch myself and, focus on the moment and what I needed to do. And with the opportunities I did have at that tournament, I really felt like I played well. I played the best I could play, and I played in the final game of that tournament, and the buzzer went off. And I remember thinking, as I was swimming out, you did everything you could. Genuinely, you hear athletes say things like that, like, you want to know you did everything you could. And I was always someone like, how do you know? How do you know? How do you really, really know? And I had that kind of peaceful moment. And so I was kind of at peace with it and ready to kind of be okay with whatever was going to happen. But there were definitely, storms in my head, days leading up to the day that he was going to ultimately name the team. Family was always like, how are you doing? Friends were like, you find out today, and being able to just kind of try to, again, the skills staying in the moment kind of helped with that anxiety as well.
And then you became an Olympic gold medalist. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
So, KK, we've nearly run out of time. Just two more quick questions. One is, have you thought about what is next? Obviously, you're 26. There's the 2020 Tokyo Games. Do you still have further aspirations with water polo, or are you going to do something different?
Yeah, good question. I think for me, I mean, I was able to win a national championship in college, and in 2009, I remember my mom being there, and she leaned over the railing and she goes, "You did it! You achieved your ultimate dream, your goal. What's next?" And I look up at her and I was like, "I don't know, get married." Like, I really never thought the Olympics was going to be in my path. That was never the dream, the goal. Obviously it became that, and being able to do it with my teammates and everyone involved, all the coaches, has been such a fulfilling thing in my life. For me, I think having the gold, like I kind of want to just leave it. I don't want to taint this experience. I just want to, let it be what it was and kind of move on. I mean, that's kind of been the dream. It's a bit harder to move on than I thought it would be. We were at one of the sports games, and my coach, I could hear him talking about, the future team, the rosters, like all these young girls that are going to get invited. And I was like, "Hey, am I on that list?" And he's like, "No, I thought you were done." And I was like getting all the competitive juices flowing. And I was like, "I'm not done. I could play." And, ultimately I'm still evaluating. But I would love to kind of, I learned from my aunt and uncle, there's life after sport, and there's amazing things to still be done. So I think I am ready for that next chapter. I don't know if it's going to take maybe one more year. I cannot call myself a world champion as my teammates can. So that might be kind of the last thing poking me to kind of bring that full circle. But ultimately still undecided. But yeah, kind of, I'm nothing specific. If I do move on, I'm not going to be a doctor. I'm not going to, wasn't able to do all these things. I don't have the goal, mapped out what's next, just kind of getting to sort of, be a non-athlete and seeing what that's about.
Well, I'm sure whatever you do next, you'll be as successful as you've been in water polo. KK, it's been so great to talk to you on today's Best in the World. How can we continue to follow your amazing journey on social media, please?
Yeah, I mean, so I have an Instagram. I think it's kk.clark. And then my Twitter is kkclarkusa. But I'm definitely more of an Instagram user. I just love sharing images and stories and all of that. So that's where you can find me. Thank you so much for having me on Richard Parr's Best in the World. It's been such a journey. And again, just such a joy to talk to you. So thank you.
Oh, the pleasure's been all ours and all mine. Thank you so much, KK Clark, for being the best in the world.
Thank you.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Thanks again to KK for appearing on this week's Best in the World with Richard Parr. If you enjoyed that chat, we've also had one of KK's teammates on the show before. Kaylee Gilchrist has been on the podcast. Go back and listen to that episode. It's on iTunes, it's on Stitcher, it's on richardparr.net. And there's lots of other athletes we've spoken to on the podcast. Maybe you want to listen back to last week's episode with Veronica Campbell-Brown. Maybe you want to listen to the Olympic sailing champion, now CrossFit competitor, Anna Tunnicliffe. Maybe you want to hear from rugby champions such as David Campese and Chester Williams. There is so much great content on the Best in the World with Richard Parr, and I love to share it with you every single Wednesday on iTunes and Stitcher. If you've got any questions for me, get in contact at Richard_Parr on Twitter or on our Facebook page, Best in the World. I would love to hear from you. And you can also send us a message at richardparr.net. If you like the show, do me a favour, please go to iTunes, give us a rating and review. It's very, very simple and it really, really helps our show. Well, it's been great to talk to you. It's been great to listen to KK Clark, one of the most positive athletes we've had on the Best in the World. I've been Richard Parr and I'll be back with you next week for another Best in the World.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.